Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm Farah, and in today's video I wanted to tell you guys about some of the books that I read in September. So I have to apologize for my voice. I do have a cold right now, so if you see it's a little choppy editing, I'm just editing out the coughs. You guys know how it is, I'm sure. But yeah, let's get started. So I read 5 books this month. 4 of them I read for the Read What You Own challenge, which was great. So I got to 4 of them off of my shelves, and then one of them I did borrow from the library because of a buddy read that MJ from Reading This Life was doing in the Fable app. It was a book that I really wanted to read anyway, so I decided to jump on that ship, and I'm glad I did because it was a fun experience. So let's get started. These aren't really going to be in any particular order, but I wanted to let you know I did finish this book called Spring, an anthology for the changing seasons. I kept saying the title wrong every time I talked about it, but it's an anthology for the changing seasons, and this is by Melissa Harrison. And this is a collection of different nature essays or nature writing collected from primarily authors in the UK. And it's a mixture of contemporary pieces, also with excerpts pulled from British classics, such as Thomas Hardy. There's Far From the Madding Crowd is in there. Charles Dickens is in here. George Eliot's in here. So it's just different pieces of writing and poetry that depict or capture the essence of the season of summer, at least how it is here in the Northern Hemisphere. So I really enjoyed this. This is part of a 4-volume series that I bought a little while ago. I'll put a picture of all 4 of the covers here. I think the covers are really beautiful, and I'm not going to lie, I bought them primarily for the covers and also because I like nature writing. But this was a great installment. I really enjoyed it. This one was great because it was something that I picked up and read every morning before work when I would sit out on our front porch, which is covered in sunlight in the morning. And I would drink my tea and, read a couple other things, but I would always try to read about 10 pages a day in this book. And so it was a great ritual for me to take that time to think about summer and the season and to be aware of the changes around me. And I think it really helped me to focus on that when I'm outside. This had a pretty big focus on birds and insects. There were a few pieces that focused on the ocean, which that didn't occur much in the spring one. And I think overall I enjoyed the contemporary pieces a little bit better than the older classic inserts. But I really enjoyed all of it. I did tab everything that I loved, so you can see in here the pink is just for poetry, a couple poems that I liked. But otherwise there really wasn't rhyme or reason. It's kind of broken up into different months too, so I did tab with purple when a new month would start so that I could kind of just pace my reading to make sure it would last throughout the whole season. Just a beautiful book. I already started autumn and I'm really enjoying it so far. So if you like nature writing, and if you live in the UK, you might actually like this even more because it does talk about certain areas or regions that I'm not familiar with. And I think the only thing that would elevate this to a higher rating for me would be as if it was written and took place in my area, when I could, relate to the areas. But really good. I really, really love this. Next, I read my first little collection of poetry that I've ever done on this channel, and really that I've ever done. I've never really gotten into poetry that much, but it was a goal of mine to start exploring a little bit more. I have struggled with poetry in the past, but I am finding that as I get older, I am able to understand it a little bit better, especially if I listen to it. So I had picked this up when I was thrifting last year at some point, and this is Emily Dickinson's Selected Poems, and this is the Dover Thrift Edition. And I flew through this. I read this in one day, and as you can see, I tabbed all the poems that I liked. I was shocked by how much I really enjoyed this. I thought this poetry was very accessible. It was very easy to read. And if you didn't know, Emily Dickinson was an American poet back in the late 1800s. And her life was very interesting. She was a very private person, and a lot of her works didn't emerge until after she had passed away, and her family had found these unpublished poems that they decided to, but probably against her wishes, publish them and make them available for people to read. And while I was reading them, I was really struck by how hauntingly beautiful some of her poems were. They focused a lot on nature and death, which was interesting, but also just about little things in daily life. I think for her time, she probably had some pretty progressive or interesting ideas that were unique. And I did get this sense from her, from some of her poems, of just this longing for love, like a yearning for a long lost love, or maybe a love that she never got to experience. And I did almost get a sense that maybe she may have been in love with a woman, Some of the poetry had that essence to it. Maybe it was just imagery, but I'll read you one real quick. So bashful when I spied her, so pretty, so ashamed, so hidden in her leaflets, lest anybody find, so breathless till I passed her, so helpless when I turned, and bore her struggling, blushing, her simple haunts beyond. For whom I robbed the dingle, for whom betrayed the dell, many will doubtless ask me, but I shall never tell. This is another one. Wild nights, were I with thee, wild nights should be our luxury. Futile the winds, to a heart in port, dumb at the compass, dumb at the chart, rowing in Eden, ah, the sea, might I but more to-night in thee. Ooh, I really, really enjoyed this collection. I'm interested in, again, diving into more poetry. If you guys have any poetry recommendations of poets that are pretty easy for a beginner like me, I would really appreciate it. But if you like Emily Dickinson and you have a favorite poem by her, please let me know what it is. I would love to know. Next, we have my ebook that I read, and this was called A Darker Wilderness, Black Nature Writing from Soil to Stars. And it was a reflection on the significance of nature within their experience and the role that it had in their lives. There were pieces about urban gardens and what it was like to grow up in an urban environment and to find nature in the little spots within that environment. Not just talking about the parks, but between the alleyways and the way nature can creep up and abandoned buildings. There was one story about this kid that they used to play in abandoned buildings, and some of them were overgrown with trees and shrubbery, and that was like a jungle to them. And it was really interesting because as someone like me, for me, I grew up in a very rural area, and I had access to nature and the outdoors every single day. Basically, if I wanted to, I could step outside, I could go away and be away from people. I could hear nature all around me and see the changing seasons so beautifully. And not everybody had that childhood or had that experience or relationship with nature. So this gets into a little bit more history too. So it was a lot different from the summer book I read, which was strictly just, I felt like, reflections on nature and how it felt from a primarily white point of view in the UK. Let's be real. This one was interesting because it did mix in factors like racism and colonialism, and it had a little bit more of a political commentary, which I know some people don't want in their environmental writing, but I found it very interesting, and it was perspective that I had never realized or never really learned. Really enjoyed being in an experience that is not like my own, and I really thought that the writing was beautiful. Very talented writers in this body of work, and I really recommend it if you enjoy that sort of thing. Next up, in an effort to move along in my Read What You Own challenge, I have been reading a whole bunch of graphic novels. If you follow me on Goodreads, you might have noticed that. But this is a set of graphic novels that I've had for a while called the Sunny series. And these I read with my older daughter probably at least 5 or 6 years ago. And we really enjoyed them. So I thought I was going to go through and donate, but so I started with one of these, and this one is called Sunny Side Up. And this was wonderful. It was so good. Even on the second reread, I really loved it in the first time I read it. But this is about a girl named Sunny. She's about 11 years old, and it takes place in the mid to late 70s. So all the artwork in here, all the panels, it's very nostalgic of 70s and early 80s in terms of home decor and the wood paneling and the different games and TV shows and decorations that we would have had back then. And it tells the story of Sunny, who is sent down to Florida to stay with her grandfather, while her parents, which you find out later, are helping to take care of their oldest son who's struggling with drug addiction. So at first we don't know this, and Sunny goes down there and she's so excited, and she's going to be in Florida, and she's thinking Disney World and all this fun stuff. But the reality is that she's staying with her grandfather in a retirement community surrounded by a bunch of older people. She does finally meet a boy her age whose father happens to work there at the community center or whatever. And he introduces her to Marvel and DC comic books. And she just develops this huge love for them and the characters. And it just tells the story of her kind of, the anxieties she's feeling and the stress she's feeling about her brother and worry about him, and how she thinks things are her fault, and just the way she interacted with her grandfather and the senior citizens around her. I thought it was so good, and it was so charming. And I really enjoyed this. I think this would be a great book for any kid that has ever struggled with that, like an older sibling that has had addiction issues, or a friend or a parent that might have gone through that. But even just for adults, I think, and my daughter at the time, she liked it, but she didn't really want to go on in this series. It was a little over her head. And as I was reading it to her, I didn't realize it was going the direction it went in. But as an adult, I did really enjoy this. And yeah, I went on to read 2 more of the books, which you'll hear about in my October wrap-up. And then the 5th book I got to in the month of September was A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. And this is book 1 in a series that is ongoing. I don't know the name of the series. It might be A Court of Thorns and Roses might be the name of the series too. But MJ from Reading This Life was doing a buddy read of this. This is a banned book, and it's part of her 24 in 24 banned books project that is going on this year that I've been participating in. And I have really wanted to read this for a while. It's a very hyped up book though, so I kept putting it off, like, this is for the kids. This is for the younger crowd, you know. I don't know if I'm really going to get into this. It's a fantasy romance, and I haven't read one of these in a really long time. This is a story about a woman named Feyre, not Farah, Feyre, that's how it was pronounced in the audiobooks at least, who's 19 years old. They live in a magical world many years ago. There's no electricity, so I'm assuming it's like hundreds of years ago. I'm picturing medieval times, but they use modern language, which threw me off a bit. Their family has recently come into poverty, and she's helping to support her 2 sisters and their father, who are just ungrateful, lazy, non-appreciative. She's out there risking her life and hunting for food and things like that. So she accidentally kills a giant wolf when she's out hunting, and it turns out that it wasn't a wolf, it was something else. And the result of that has brought someone from another realm who is a fairy, a fae, who are just like people, but they have magical abilities, and they're separated by some magical wall, and there's a treaty that separates them. But anyway, he gets over there. He has transformation powers. He can transform himself into a giant beast. So this is supposed to be a loose Beauty and the Beast retelling. She's the beauty and he's the beast. Even though he looks like Chris Hemsworth from Thor in my eyes, so I didn't buy the whole beast thing enough, you know, for that love story. But anyway, so things ensue, and she basically has to go back and live with him as a prisoner in his house, you know, and they're gonna fall in love because that's creepy. The first half of the book I found to be a little bit slow. I wasn't getting into it as much as I could have, and I think part of that was because I did start this as an audiobook. First, I tried the dramatized audiobook version, which was too dramatic. I thought the voice acting of our main character was just overly dramatic, and it was a bit too much for me. The second audiobook, I made it a lot further through it, but again, the voice narrator, she didn't quite fit the personality that I was trying to get from Feyre. And I did struggle with the characterization of some of these characters throughout the book, and I felt like they just weren't beefed up enough for me. I'm a very character-driven reader, so I like to really be able to feel something for the characters and want them to be okay and just feel like a compassion for them. But the way they were written, it just didn't give me enough, I felt. And the plot wasn't moving along fast enough. So the first half of the book, I was a little bit like, but I kept reading. And the buddy read, or the group read aspect of it, was the most fun part, because it was fun to comment along with everybody else reading and kind of get their reactions and their insights. And it helped, it definitely enhanced my experience of reading this. So as the book moves along, things happen, and she's going to fall in love with somebody, of course, but it's very insta-lovey, and I don't know, I feel like I'm complaining so much. I gave this book 4 stars, so I really liked it, and I'm definitely going to read on with it. But the second half of the book was definitely better. We get more of our villain, we get more gruesomeness, we get more action, and she has to go through a series of trials in order to save her own life and to try to save the humankind of this fairy group. So her going through these different trials was really fun, and I like how the book ended. I'm not sure if I enjoy the twist that I accidentally saw coming because I looked at fan art. But I am interested to see where this goes. This was just fun. I think going forward, I'm not going to overanalyze it. These books are just meant to be fun. They're an escape. The world was very descriptive. I had a very easy time picturing where I was and how different it was from here, and especially the under the mountain scenes was really good and creepy. There was some good humor in here. I did find myself laughing out loud to some the lines that Lucian had. He was great. He was one of my favorite characters. But the romance just wasn't quite gripping me. I have a feeling there's a second person that's going to come along. I mean, yeah, definitely it's going to happen, which probably will be more interesting and dynamic because he just had a lot more personality. So I enjoyed it quite a bit, again, enhanced a lot by the group read, and I'm definitely going to move forward with the series, just not quite yet because I have a couple other series that I would like to finish next. So that's it for my wrap up. It was a really good reading month. I had fun. It was a good diversity of books I felt like I picked, and I'm really thankful that you guys are here, and thank you so much for watching. I just wanted to say again, thank you so much for all the wonderful and kind comments you guys left for me on my 1,000 subscriber video tag that I just did. So I really appreciate you guys. So thank you guys very much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I hope your October is going well, and I will see you soon. Thank you again. Take care.